Okay, people, so I thought I would do something a little bit different today. I'm going to respond to a video that someone here, One Tired Numbers, had put up called Daniel Dennett from the Big Thinkers series. And I'm going to try to see if I can't respond a little bit to the Daniel Dennett video. And if you haven't seen the video, please, I'm going to post a link to it right now. First watch the video. It's about 20 minutes. It's really worth checking out. And I'm going to see if I can't. I want to say some things about the video. Now, first off, I don't in any way want to claim, superiority to Daniel Dennett. I'm happy enough to claim that this is a scholar whose work I look up to. I've read a lot of Dennett. I've even taught some of his work in class before. But I'm interested in some way in offering some criticisms of this video, partly to maybe engage some of the ideas. My guess is not enough people have seen that video, so I want to promote it. But I would like to engage some of the ideas there, but also maybe to address the way that these short little videos, even 20 minutes, so fail to capture a view. And I wonder what Daniel Dennett actually felt about that video. If he didn't, after seeing the way it had been woven together, and I don't know if it was it must have been on a TV show, and the way it was woven into these three different segments and then stitched together, it almost appears contradictory in a lot of ways. And so I'm going to see if I can't say that. So, or see if I can't explain that more clearly. Okay, so he starts off and within the first minute or so, and his argument is basically he's interested in questions about creativity, mind, and consciousness, and could science create something like mind? And really he's also interested in how was nature able to create or evolve mind, and he's really interested ultimately in how mind works. And these are some of the sort of actual phraseology that he employs in that first minute or so. And we can already notice it. First, there's a reliance upon the word works, and there's this, again, a very mechanistic orientation, but the equivocation over evolved and created. Now, it appears again and again throughout the video, but he says that science would create a mind. He wouldn't use the language science would evolve a mind. That is, we're not using science to evolve a robot. No, we're using science to create a robot. But then he wants to say that it's the exact same process that's going on, that when nature evolved a mind, and it gets much worse. Okay, so then at about, he goes right after that, he drifts right from that again. We're about a minute and a half in. He says these two questions. The one question is, what am I and what am I here for? And we must address these. And he says we've gotten pretty good at the first one here. The second one maybe has lapsed. When he gets to the what am I, and I obviously agree with so much of this, right? But he acknowledges there's about 3 minutes in or so, 3:40 in, he starts to get at this issue of symbionts and the degree to which our bodies are comprised of countless other organisms at different levels, cellular levels. I mean, you have various forms of bacteria without which you'd be dead. I mean, your body it's a huge ongoing. It's an event of living. You're not just a thing, right? So there's already this deep sense of him recognizing that an organism has evolved over billions of years with deep symbiotic relationships that are invisible to the eye. I mean, microscopes reveal this whole, this world living on you. I mean, you're an ecosystem. And then he wants to suggest that, okay, so he does this, and again, this is really good stuff. And then he goes, the problem is the way that people think about mind and consciousness, and to which I agree. So then when he moves toward how he began as a youth and what the problems really are, it was when he encountered Descartes. And Descartes' notion of the little person as the picture inside the head who's representing the world, like the eyes are windows and there's a little guy inside working the wheels. Well, I think we all, I don't know, I hope we all disagree with this. Now, he returns to this again about 8 minutes in, 8:50 to 9, and then at the very end when he talks about the soul, and he says, there's so many people who don't want to believe that you can explain what they experience as their soul or their unique individuality by materiality and by reducing it down to material. Now, I agree with him there. I'm not against the materialist position, but I think what he's doing in this video, or the video is casting him this way. I'm not saying it's his position, but it's, or I would love, it would be awesome to have him encounter this and respond. Very unlikely. But it's not materialism. The problem is that he's introducing a reductive functionalism that it's highly suspect because it's loaded with creative intent on the mind of those who would be designing these robots. But anyway, so he at 3 different points he's picking on a kind of Cartesianism. At about 3.5 or maybe 4 minutes in, he's talking about it. He talks about it again about 8 or 9 minutes in, and then toward the end when he's talking about soul talk. Again, all of these I'm on board with. Yes, people need to get beyond Descartes. They need to get beyond some sort of inner soul substance or some sort of thinking substance that's removed from ongoing biological process. And it is neurochemical, but if he would have stuck with his argument just a second ago, it isn't just neurochemical. The neurochemical was dependent upon larger environmental relations like all those symbionts that are actually making my body possible. But again, he sort of slipped that. I think it's partly to make it clear to the people who are watching. I'm not sure what that is. So then he goes to Darwin. That's where it starts to get really interesting. It's about 5 minutes in. He says, prior to Darwin, there was a basic orientation, which is that the more intelligent makes the lesser intelligent. I mean, that was just basic to logic, and that the smart makes the stupid, as he says. You never see a pot make a potter. That is, the potter makes the pot. The blacksmith makes the horseshoe, not the other way around. And okay, so that's interesting. Okay, I think that's okay. I guess we can see what his logic is going with there, but now it's starting to get interesting of how that relates to this nature stuff here a second, because he's about to move to artificial intelligence. So we're agreeing with that. That was the traditional view, and then he says, and then Alan Turing hits. Turing says, look, with artificial intelligence and mechanized algorithmic process, you can sort of boil mind down to brain activity in the same way that you can boil thinking down to mechanical activity, and that mind is basically a mechanism. And he wants to say that it's reducible to the neuronal firing patterns and the ongoing neurochemical process without someone there at the helm, without a little guy operating it all, to which I think we can agree. But the problem, again, is that there is no mind, if by that we mean a biological brain that would be separable from all of those other brains by which it became the brain that it is. That is, brains, they develop through neuronal systems that are partly mirror neurons that evolve through other people. Language acquisition is dependent upon other brains, and so some of it starts to look more and more reductive the more that he tries to locate sort of the locust of self-reflexive human consciousness within the brain itself, without realizing the larger social environment of brains in the same way that the body is dependent upon bacteria and other kind of symbiotic organisms that are we're the environment for lots that make us possible. Okay, so he wants to say, look, we're more than science. He says the problem has been that people want to believe that we're somehow more than science could tell us, and I think that's where it starts to get interesting, because I think we are. We are more than science could ever tell us, at least to the extent that we can raise questions about what were the necessary preconditions for the emergence of the Big Bang. Now, again, somebody's going to say, there wasn't anything there. We can get all these problems. Well, the point is that we can raise questions beyond the biology. We can raise questions into the physics and the chemistry that preceded the biology, and to the extent that we're able to do that, science will tell us that science can't answer those questions. But what he's going to try to do, it's like he wants to say, no, science can tell us we're basically mechanisms. Well, okay, I think this starts to get odd, and or he falls into an equivocation, because if the questions that he began with were, what am I and what am I here for? Now, if we're able to design a robot that does have, let's just say that humans actually do create consciousness in a robot. Let's just, for argument's sake, we have something like a data. If that would really happen, wouldn't that by necessity be a different kind of consciousness? That is, this would be a consciousness that was created. It was designed. And that was his whole argument. His argument is that we weren't created. We somehow evolved through blind process. But the nature of this consciousness, to the extent that it was able to understand itself, would feel itself as a different consciousness. Now, look, you can see this problem get even worse. Okay? He goes on, and about 12 minutes and 20 minutes in, again, it must be a different clip in the way that's being stitched together. And now he's distancing himself from philosophers. Yeah, these philosophers, they sit around and they speculate, but not him. He's in there doing practical, concrete stuff. And I think what he's saying is right. There is a lot of speculative people who, they do philosophy but don't know really how to do anything. And he says, no, I'm more interested in what we're able to do once we have the right questions. Philosophy is good and wonderful stuff when you don't know the right questions, and it's about learning to develop the questions. That's why philosophy is so important. But once you have the questions, get to work. And he finds about this 13 minutes so into the video, he introduces this robotic dog that he and a colleague have found, and they're going to try to reverse engineer it. Now, what's so interesting is that the robotic dog is already based off a model. That is, nature evolved, and even dogs, they get interesting, see? Now, this equivocation between the evolution and conscious design starts to appear. That is, we don't need some guy working the wheels behind it all, but we do need to make some sort of complex distinctions between different kinds of temporality that become possible for living organisms rather than machines which are basically in the now. A human conscious experience is an elongated ecstatical stretch. It has protensions and retentions. That is, it's an elongated clearing that it retainingly awaits. I'm not sure what the qualia of conscious temporal experience will be of machines. But again, just for argument's sake, what's so interesting is that it's designed to look like a dog and then in some way serve the function of a dog. So to that extent, it does have a function prescribed by a human in a way that a dog evolved. And even if we've genetically bred and, I guess, raised dogs, or we've done forms of selective breeding that have been the equivalent of creating new breeds of dog that wouldn't have been there by natural selection, I think this is something radically, radically different than the conscious design of a robot. In fact, he says the appeal of robotics, this is Dennett, the appeal of robotics is to understand it by designing it in an alien medium. See, this is what's so interesting. He says in an alien medium. He says, no, what you need to do is you find something that we wouldn't think could think, like silicon, and try to design it in such a way that the material functionality gives the equivalence of what we're going to call consciousness. Now, what's odd is that we say, well, if it mimics it in function, that might as well, let's just call that thought. What's so odd about that is that it seems like it's a materialist position, but it's actually an anti-materialist position. It's a functionalist argument, and what you could say is that, no, what makes human consciousness what it is the materials out of which it's made, which include being a host of life and literally the evolutionary process that took billions of years to develop, including the atmospheric and the larger material conditions that, again, are part of, the symbiotic, ongoing relationship that we have on countless levels with the organic world. We're not just a thing in the world representing. So he ends up with an odd kind of representationalism that he's smuggling in, right? He goes toward the end And he says that, people don't want to believe that the algorithmic process of nature, which evolved a nightingale, is just as complex as a poem about a nightingale. And he says, well, I don't understand why people, they think that their poem about a nightingale is somehow to be dignified and or beyond scientific representation, but they don't have any problem with the idea that nature could explain the evolution of a nightingale. There does seem to be, again, an equivocation over the difference between evolution and conscious selection, conscious design. And the more that he tries to suggest that they're radically different, that is, he would never say that science will evolve a mind in robots. That's not the right terminology. And yet he wants to say that if we create a robot that will be able to think, it will have something like consciousness. Well, no. Consciousness seems to be such that it evolves rather than is created. That's part of what we mean by consciousness. And a consciousness that would be created would experience itself and know itself as created. And then you'd say, well, then it has a what it was created for. Now, he wanted to say we've given up on the what were we for, but maybe the inability to know what we are in some ultimate context is part of what's so liberating about what humans are for. I think the thing that I'll just end with, and please go see the video and then see if you can see what I mean by that equivocation. I would love to see other people respond to this. I really enjoyed the video. He ends the video with saying, about 20 minutes in, he says, people, they look out in the world and they see a beautiful sunset, or they see a scientific accomplishment, and they feel gratitude and they want to say thanks. They say thank you. There's a tendency to want to experience that sense of thanks. Will that have to be designed into a robot? Would that naturally occur, or would the robot only think to thank the particular person who designed it? Okay, so please, people, think about that video, and I'd love to see some response. Thank you.